Exeter, New Hampshire, November 13th, 1984. A morning that should have passed without notice. An 8-year-old girl walks to school, a route she knew by heart. She is seen once, crossing the street, then gone. No trace, no sound. A child swallowed by daylight. Within hours, panic. Within days, a town drained by search. Within weeks, hope begins to fade. This is the story of Tammy Belanger, a case that turned ordinary into unthinkable, leaving questions never answered. This is City Shadows, Unsolved. The town of Exeter, New Hampshire, had always offered a sense of quiet comfort. Nestled among winding roads and historic buildings, it was a place where parents felt safe enough to let their children roam freely and walk to school without fear. On the morning of November 13th, 1984, that safety was tested in the worst possible way. For 8-year-old Tammy Belanger, it was a school day like any other, though no one could have imagined it would be the last morning her family would ever see her. Tammy was born on February 24th, 1976. Those who knew her describe her as gentle, shy, and full of curiosity. Each day, she followed the same routine. She would eat breakfast, pack her backpack, put on her coat, and step outside to walk the familiar streets. It was a path she had taken since first grade. Parents in Exeter did not question their children's independence. In the 1980s, especially in small towns, this freedom was a normal part of childhood. That morning, Tammy woke up as usual. The weather was crisp. Tammy left her house around 8 a.m., just like she always did. Her mother, Patricia, watched Tammy head out into the chilly morning, not knowing that this ordinary moment would remain frozen in her memory forever. Yet, on this morning, something along the way would change everything. A neighbor later remembered seeing her cross Court Street around 8 a.m. That sighting would be the last confirmed moment anyone saw Tammy before she vanished. The walk from Court Street to Lincoln Street Elementary should have taken only minutes. But somewhere between that street corner and the classroom, she disappeared. She did not run away. She did not get lost. She simply never made it inside. In 1984, school attendance systems were not what we know today. No one at school called her home. No alarm bells rang. By all appearances, the day continued normally. It was not until the final bell rang that the horrifying reality began to surface. At 3:30 p.m., Patricia expected her daughter to return home. The minutes ticked by, but as the hour went on, worry set in. She picked up the phone. The voice on the other end delivered the shocking news. Tammy had never arrived at school that day. Panic surged. Within hours, the streets of Exeter were filled with flashing lights, radios crackling, and the sound of doors knocking. In a small town like Exeter, where everyone knew each other, the news spread quickly. A child was missing. That night, the search began. Flashlights pierced the darkness. Helicopters circled overhead. Tension filled the air with an unspoken fear. A little girl had vanished without a trace. For Patricia and the Belanger family, the night felt endless. Every sound, every knock raised hope, but as the hours stretched into the early morning, no such relief came. What started as an ordinary Tuesday had turned into every parent's worst nightmare. And it was just the beginning. The next morning, Exeter woke up to a community on edge. Word had spread quickly the night before, first through whispers, then phone calls, and finally as the lead story on local news. By sunrise, the town was fully aware that a child had gone missing. This was no longer just one family's grief. It was now the collective nightmare of an entire community. The Exeter Police Department quickly organized one of the largest searches in the town's history. Officers knew the first 24 or 48 hours were critical. They called for help from state police, county sheriffs, and the FBI. The scale of the response emphasized the seriousness. The assumption was grim. Tammy had been taken. Volunteers from every part of Exeter came forward. Maps were marked with grids. Residents were urged to check their sheds, garages, and barns. No stone was left unturned. Searchers combed through thick woods, calling out Tammy's name. The river was searched with boats and divers. Helicopters hovered overhead. With every passing hour, the search perimeter widened. Tracking dogs were brought in. They sniffed sidewalks and lawns. But whatever scent they found quickly faded. There were no belongings, no broken branches, no footprints. It was as though Tammy had stepped off the face of the earth. By the second day, the media had arrived. Television crews filmed from street corners. Cameras captured Tammy's school photo, her small face smiling shyly. That photo appeared in newspapers across New England. Her image became one of the most recognizable in the state. As days passed, the search yielded nothing. Helicopters came and went with no news. Divers resurfaced empty-handed. Volunteers returned exhausted. No backpack, no lunchbox, no clue. By November 20th, the tone shifted. Police Chief William Anderson spoke frankly. He said what no parent wanted to hear. Hope of finding Tammy alive was fading. The investigation was now about uncovering an abduction. For Exeter, this was devastating. Parents kept children closer. The town, once defined by safety, was now marked by fear. Investigators increased efforts. They re-interviewed neighbors, scrutinized timelines. Yet the more they searched, the more elusive the truth became. National organizations noticed. The FBI offered resources. Flyers were distributed. For Patricia, each flyer was a reminder and a lifeline of hope. Yet there was silence. No ransom note, no phone call, no sighting, just silence. The lack of evidence baffled investigators. Children who wandered away left a trail. But in Tammy's case, there was nothing, vanished in broad daylight. The search grew from local to statewide. For her family, it was deeply personal. Patricia held on to hope, her voice breaking. The days long, the nights longer. By month's end, not a single piece of evidence was found. The desperate race against time became a lengthy investigation, filled with more questions than answers. Tammy was gone, and no one could explain how. With no trace of Tammy found during the exhaustive ground, air, and water searches, investigators turned their full attention to the possibility of an abduction, the disappearance of an 8-year-old girl on her way to school in broad daylight, without a sound or struggle, demanded closer scrutiny of people who lived in or frequented the neighborhood. Exeter police, along with state and federal agents, began the slow, methodical process of knocking on doors, compiling lists of sex offenders, and tracking down anyone with a troubling history. Their first significant lead came in the form of a man whose name was already familiar to law enforcement, a drifter, seen around Exeter in the days leading up to Tammy's disappearance. No permanent address, often slept in his car, known for hanging around bars and motels along Route 108. Rumors circulated quickly. A few locals recalled seeing him near Court Street not long before Tammy was last spotted. Detectives brought him in for questioning. In a small, windowless room, the man appeared nervous, shifting in his chair, chain-smoking, avoiding eye contact. He admitted to being in town on November 13th, but his timeline was vague. He said he was just passing through. He couldn't recall exact times or locations. His alibi was shaky. Officers pressed him. Had he ever seen Tammy? He denied it firmly. Still, investigators were uneasy. His criminal record included petty theft. disorderly conduct, and disturbing accusations involving young women. Police obtained a warrant, searched his beat-up sedan, scoured every inch for hair, fibers, any trace of Tammy. Nothing surfaced. His motel room was also searched. Sheets, clothing, belongings bagged for testing. The results came back inconclusive. No evidence linked him to Tammy. With no physical proof, they were forced to release him. Frustration grew. Meanwhile, the FBI's behavioral science unit was consulted. Profilers studied the case. Their assessment suggested the abductor was likely familiar with the area, someone who had planned carefully or acted with precision. The profile hinted at a local, possibly a man living quietly in the community, blending in, hiding dark tendencies behind a facade. This profile cast new light. The possibility of a trusted local was far more chilling. Detectives revisited interviews, scrutinized not just strangers, but neighbors, shopkeepers, even parents. Was Tammy taken by someone she knew? As December approached, pressure mounted. The holidays loomed. Exeter was still without answers. Patricia pleaded for compassion, for whoever had her daughter to return her. Law enforcement remained tight-lipped. In private, detectives admitted how unsettling the silence had become. They had scoured cars, homes, woods, waterways, interrogated suspects, followed false leads, fielded dozens of tips. Yet nothing but dead ends. The suspect they released lingered in their minds. Had they let the right man slip through? Or was the real abductor still moving quietly among them? The investigation expanded. Over 1,000 leads logged. Rumors, speculation, possible sightings that collapsed under scrutiny. Forensic teams analyzed countless items. Science provided no breakthrough. The community grew restless. Whispers turned to accusations. Some pointed at neighbors, others at drifters, others at law enforcement itself. For Exeter, the absence of closure was unbearable. The town had opened its doors, its barns, its rivers, its woods. Police had chased suspects and theories, but the truth remained elusive. And somewhere in the midst of that winter chill, the reality settled in. Tammy's case was no longer just a missing child report. It was fast becoming a mystery that threatened to define Exeter for years to come. By January 1985, nearly 2 months after Tammy Lynn Belanger vanished, the once relentless pace of the investigation began to slow. Days filled with searches, frantic interviews, and countless tips produced little substance. What started as a community-wide effort, fueled by urgency and hope, was settling into an unsettling quiet. The roadblocks, once crowded with officers and volunteers, now stood empty. Patrol cars still drove through the neighborhood, but with less intent. For Patricia and Norman Belanger, the quiet was unbearable. The first weeks had been filled with constant activity, calls from police, media requests, neighbors arriving with meals. But as time passed, the visits decreased. The phone rang less often. The front porch stood empty. They found themselves sitting in their living room, staring at the empty chair where Tammy used to sit. Patricia often walked into Tammy's bedroom, running her hand across the bedspread, folding clothes she would never wear again. Meanwhile, detectives struggled with their own frustration. Each promising lead seemed to lead to nothing. Witnesses misremembered details. Tips turned out to be false. A reported sighting in Vermont vanished. It was another child. Even the suspect they had questioned offered no new evidence. Without a body, physical proof, or confession, the case was slipping into limbo. As weeks turned into months, Exeter residents grew anxious. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered that someone from the town had taken Tammy. Others suspected passing strangers. The theories ranged from plausible to bizarre. Parents who once trusted the sidewalks now held their children's hands tighter. Law enforcement tried to keep the case in the public eye. Flyers with Tammy's picture remained on telephone poles and store bulletin boards. Patrol officers spoke in schools. Parents formed neighborhood watches. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the posters began to curl and fade. The press also began to lose interest. In November and December, Tammy's case filled headlines. But by early spring, reporters focused on newer stories. Each time Patricia spoke publicly, she reminded them of her daughter's face, her laugh, the way she skipped down the street in her red jacket. Yet cameras became rare. Soon, her words reached only local audiences. The silence felt suffocating. Still, a small group of detectives refused to give up. They met weekly, reviewed files, re-interviewed witnesses, drove the same streets Tammy had walked. They studied maps, marking blind corners, driveways, and alleys. And always, they returned to the same haunting thought. It could have taken less than a minute. The lack of closure gnawed at everyone. Teachers talked about her empty desk. Friends whispered about her absence. Classmates stopped asking when she would return. By the end of the first year, Tammy's disappearance was no longer in the daily news. The Belangers faced birthdays and holidays without her. The investigation was still open, but its pace slowed to a crawl. Detectives shifted to other assignments. Leads were tucked away. The command post was dismantled. Tammy's file now rested in the pending cabinet. The shift from active case to cold case was not sudden. It was slow, a gradual fading of urgency, but it was still devastating. For a community that had searched every inch of its land, for a family that had pleaded for help, for investigators who chased down every lead, the realization was the same. Without new evidence, Tammy's story will remain stuck in time. In that stasis, Exeter endured a silence more frightening than any crime scene, the silence of not knowing. In late December 1984, just weeks after Tammy Lynn Belanger disappeared, investigators received a name that cast a long and troubling shadow over the case: Victor Wanyutai. He was familiar to law enforcement. His criminal history made police take notice immediately. In 1979, Wanyutai was convicted of sexual assault against his 13-year-old stepdaughter. He served 4 years in prison, paroled in July 1983. By the time Tammy vanished, he was living in a motel in Rye, New Hampshire, barely 10 miles from Exeter. The timing, the distance, his background, all lined up in ways investigators could not overlook. Wanyutai's name first became public through a television report. For the community, it was a chilling revelation. Parents now had a face to associate with their fears. A man with a documented history of harming children, living within driving distance of Tammy's route. The suspicion was compelling. When police focused on him, they found his situation already unstable. By December 1984, Wanyutai was back in custody, arrested for violating parole. He had left New Hampshire without notice, picked up a misdemeanor in Florida. On December 28th, the parole board revoked his parole. For detectives, relief and frustration. A dangerous man was off the streets. But prison alone could not provide answers. The deeper they investigated, the darker it became. Wanyutai's time in Florida put him close to another unsolved disappearance. On May 27, 1984, 6 months before Tammy vanished, 8-year-old Marjorie Christie, Luna disappeared from Green Acres, Florida. She walked to a local store, never returned. Witnesses reported seeing her with an older man. She was never found. Records showed Wanyutai had been living in the same area. 2 girls, both 8 years old. Both vanished while walking alone. Both cases, Wanyutai nearby. Investigators contacted Florida authorities. A disturbing pattern emerged. No direct evidence. No witnesses placing Tammy in his car. No physical items. But the circumstantial parallels were undeniable. His presence in two towns at two critical times. A predator who knew how to strike swiftly, leaving no trace. For the Belanger family, this brought both hope and despair. Hope, a clear suspect. Despair, no confession. No discovery of Tammy's belongings. No definitive proof. Patricia gave interviews, her voice measured yet weary, pleading for anyone who might have seen something come forward. But time had dulled memories. In the public eye, suspicion grew. Neighbors spoke his name with certainty. He was nearby. He had the history. He had no alibi. Yet, in a court of law, suspicion is not enough. Police cannot charge him. They could only watch. Through the late 1980s, the case stalled again. Wanyutai in custody for other offenses. The immediate threat managed, but the lack of evidence weighed heavily. They reviewed his past, tracked his movements, interviewed anyone who had encountered him. Still, the case remained weak. Each day without resolution left Tammy's parents in unending limbo. The connection between Tammy and Christy Luna deepened the tragedy. Two families, separated by 1,000 miles, tied by the same pain, the same unanswered questions, the same possible suspect. Both cases relied on circumstantial evidence, knowing but not proving, suspecting but not convicting. Year after year, Wanyutai's name stayed the one constant in Tammy's file, an ominous figure, linked, but always just out of reach. By the early 1990s, it became clear, unless new evidence appeared, Tammy's case would remain unsolved. As Wanyutai continued his cycle of criminal behavior in Florida, the haunting thought lingered. If he was responsible, he may have taken the truth with him into every prison cell, every courtroom, every parole hearing, and eventually to his grave. As the calendar moved from the mid-1980s into the 1990s, the case of Tammy Lynn Belanger shifted from an active investigation into one of New Hampshire's most haunting cold cases. For the Belanger family, time did not heal. It only deepened the pain. Another birthday without candles. Another school picture day without her smile. Another Christmas with one gift forever unopened. Her parents continued to seek answers, refusing to let her memory fade. In Exeter, the memory of November 13th, 1984, lingered heavily in the air. Victor Wanyutai continued to live in a way that troubled investigators. After serving his parole revocation, he moved back to Florida. His name reappeared in police reports. In 1992, convicted of burglary and indecent exposure, alarming charges, a continuing pattern of predatory behavior. Even in his 50s, still offending, still unable to control his impulses. Those who suspected him grew more certain. Florida law enforcement kept Wanyutai's name alive regarding Christy Luna. They questioned him repeatedly over the years. He never budged, denied any involvement, claimed not to know the girls, offered nothing useful. The same agonizing cycle. A man who appeared guilty, behaved guilty, had a past that screamed guilt, yet no evidence that would stand in court. The 1990s brought DNA testing, a powerful asset for solving cold cases. Old files reopened, old evidence retested. But in Tammy's case, there was nothing to test. No clothing, no hair, no remains. Her disappearance had been clean, almost surgical. No material for modern science to examine. The most frustrating aspect. A single hair could have changed everything. Without it, detectives left grasping at fragile memories. In Exeter, the case file never closed. Detectives came and went. Tammy's folder always passed along. Each new officer opened the thick binder, flipped through the reports, stared into the same void. Pages chronicled an exhaustive effort. Doors knocked, maps marked, phone records traced, all ending at the same point. Tammy walking across Court Street, then vanishing forever. For the community, the years softened the sharp edges of fear, but the memory never left. Exeter evolved. But for those who were there in 1984, Tammy's absence was a lasting scar. The sound of helicopters, the barking of dogs, FBI agents on quiet New England streets. Occasionally, the case would appear in local newspapers, on anniversaries. Each article the same story, a plea for information, a reminder, a photograph of a smiling 8-year-old, a ghost of time. The new millennium brought renewed hope. The New Hampshire Cold Case Unit established. Old files reviewed with fresh perspectives. Detectives pulled out Tammy's binder, retraced the steps of 1984, re-interviewed aging witnesses, accessed new federal databases. They revisited Wanyutai. By then, his health was declining, cycling in and out of prison, a man who never changed. Even as his health waned, his silence remained. For Patricia Belanger, the passing years fueled her determination. She spoke at events, took part in awareness programs, worked to keep Tammy's story alive. She knew the statistics, how rare it was for cases this old to be solved. But she refused to let her daughter become just another name. Each public appearance carried the same quiet message. Someone out there knows. And still, the years went by. Tammy would have turned 18 in 1994, graduated high school the same year. By the 2000s, she would have been an adult, perhaps married, perhaps raising her own children. But all of that existed only in imagination. The reality remained frozen in 1984. A little girl walking to school in her red jacket, never to grow older. By the early 2000s, the case was trapped in a cruel paradox. Everyone believed they knew who was responsible. Everyone pointed to Victor Wanyutai. Yet, no one could prove it. With each passing year, the chance grew that he would take the truth to his grave. For investigators, the most bitter frustration, to stand on the brink of certainty, yet remain unable to step over it. By the time the 2010s arrived, Victor Wanyutai had become nearly synonymous with the disappearance of Tammy Lynn Belanger. His presence loomed over the case like an inescapable shadow. Questioned, investigated, monitored, his past crimes painted him as a man capable of terrible acts. His proximity to Tammy's route, his connection to Christy Luna, his lifelong record of offenses, a picture so damning, many in Exeter quietly concluded he must be responsible. Yet, never charged, never tried. The truth remained hidden within him. By 2012, Wanyutai was 70 years old, living in a Florida retirement community, no longer physically imposing. Now frail, health declining, his criminal record still defined him. Neighbors were shocked. Some opposed his presence. Others kept a cautious watch. Even in old age, his reputation haunted him. For investigators, urgency was rising. His time was running out. Detectives quietly hoped that as he neared the end, he might confess. Aging suspects sometimes seek forgiveness. Truths shared from hospital beds. Deathbed confessions offering peace after years of pain. For Tammy's parents, that hope flickered faintly. If not justice in the courtroom, perhaps truth. But that moment never came. In November 2012, nearly 28 years after Tammy vanished, Victor Wanyutai died in Florida. He left this world as he had lived for decades, under suspicion, never convicted. Whatever he knew about Tammy Lynn Belanger, Whatever he knew about Christy Luna went with him to his grave. The fragile hope of confession gone. For Tammy's family, the news felt like a second loss. No chance to confront him. No admission. No apology. No acknowledgement. Patricia Belanger again left with silence. The not knowing, a special kind of torment. For law enforcement, his death was a blow. Detectives who built careers around Tammy's case, who tracked his movements, interrogated him, tried to break through, so close to certainty, so far from proof. Now, the chance to put him before a jury, gone forever. The frustration, not just professional, deeply personal. In Exeter, mixed feelings. Relief, he could never harm another child. But his death meant the one person most likely to know could no longer be compelled to speak. The town left in the same place as 1984, without answers, without closure, without truth. Even after his passing, the questions persisted. Did he take Tammy from Court Street? Was she lured into his vehicle? Did he act alone? And most importantly, where was she now? No remains, no physical evidence. The mystery unresolved, the story unfinished. Wanyatai's death became a reminder of the harsh reality of cold cases. Suspects die, memories fade, evidence disappears. Time is both an enemy and an obstacle. The one man who could have ended decades of uncertainty chose silence until the very end. Nearly 3 decades since Tammy left home for school. 3 decades of speculation, grief, unanswered questions. Now, with Wanyatai gone, her case left suspended, still open, still unsolved, still waiting. The silence of his grave, matched only by the silence that had haunted Exeter since November 1984. The disappearance of Tammy Lynn Belanger left a scar that has never truly healed. For her family, life was divided into 2 parts. The time before November 13th, 1984, and the long, painful years that followed. Every birthday was marked by her absence. Every holiday had an empty space. Every quiet moment at the dinner table reminded them she was gone. Her mother, Patricia, carried that emptiness always. In interviews years later, she spoke of the torment of not knowing. She woke each day to the same unanswered question. Where's Tammy? It was a grief frozen in time, made worse by the cruel uncertainty. There was no body ever found, no grave to visit. Their daughter had vanished into a void, leaving only questions behind. The town of Exeter also carried the weight of that day. After Tammy vanished, parents became deeply fearful. Children were no longer allowed to walk to school alone. Carpools were organized. Neighbors watched each other more closely. Trust, something once given freely in small towns, became harder to offer. A generation of children in Exeter grew up hearing Tammy's story. It was a whispered cautionary tale, a reminder that safety could be shattered in an instant. The town that once felt so safe and close-knit now knew that danger could be anywhere, even on a sunny morning on a familiar street. Across the nation, Tammy's case became part of a larger change. The 1980s were a pivotal time. Cases like Adam Walsh and Eden Patz forced America to confront a terrifying reality, the reality of child abductions. Tammy's face appeared in news reports. Her name was placed in missing children's registries. Her story highlighted the urgent need for change. It led to new laws. It led to the creation of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Tammy's local tragedy became part of a national movement for child safety. In New Hampshire, her disappearance led to real changes. Schools began teaching safety more directly. Stranger danger campaigns grew. Police improved how they responded to missing children. It was too late for Tammy, but these changes helped others. Still, they offered little comfort to her family. Awareness could not fill the emptiness she left behind. The years continued to pass. Anniversaries became quiet milestones of reflection. On the 10th anniversary, people gathered in Exeter to remember Tammy. They spoke of her smile. They remembered her laughter. They recalled her love for books and the simple joys of childhood. On the 20th anniversary, news articles asked the same haunting questions. By the 30th anniversary, Tammy had been gone longer than she had been alive, but her memory remained vivid in the town that lost her. People held vigils. They said prayers. They held on to a fragile hope that one day the truth would finally come out. For police investigators, Tammy's case was one that never closed. Retired officers thought about it long after they left the job. New detectives inherited the thick case file. They read through old notes. They revisited old leads. They hoped new technology would find a clue everyone else had missed. But no new evidence ever appeared. The answers refused to be found. The main suspect, Victor Wanyutai, died in 2012. His death closed the door forever. It meant no confession, no deathbed revelation, no chance to finally learn the truth. Some people are certain he was guilty. Others say that without physical proof, we can never be sure. So the mystery remains, an open wound that cannot heal. For the Belanger family, closure remains out of reach. Even today, Tammy's face can be found in missing children's databases. Her case is discussed in true crime podcasts and online forums. Every time her story is told, new people learn her name. This keeps her memory alive. It ensures she is not forgotten. Not just a name in a cold case file. Not just another statistic. The legacy of Tammy's disappearance is one of heartbreak and endurance. It is the story of a family that has lived for decades without answers. It is the story of a town that learned safety is fragile. It is the story of a justice system that sometimes cannot find the truth. But most of all, it is the story of a little girl. A little girl whose ordinary walk to school became an eternal mystery. A walk that was cut short, leaving her forever 8 years old in the hearts of those who loved her. And until the day her fate is finally revealed, her name will continue to be spoken. A reminder of innocence lost, and the relentless, enduring search for answers. The file remains open. The mystery endures. But Tammy's story isn't over. Not as long as we remember her. What do you think happened that morning? Who was responsible? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, please like and share this video. Keeping her name alive is how we honor her memory. Thank you for watching.